Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman and I am your host. And my guest today is Dr. Matt Bellis. He is a psychologist, a stand-up comic, and an author. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did. You
Okay,
didn't even
good.
ask, but you got it. First try.
So welcome. You know, when I mentioned author, you wrote a book called
A Better High.
A Better High. And I'm going to jump right into the conversation because as a psychologist, you kind of have all that information and you've studied also the mechanics of the brain and, you know, how it forms at different stages. But at the same time, you're a stand-up comic. And that's kind of an interesting marriage. So tell me what it is that you do and what's your mission?
Well, it's funny, about once a year I get a call from some television producer that says something to the effect of, "We need a psychologist who's funny, and you appear to be the only one." So I guess I'm flattered by that. So it is an odd combination. I got started in stand-up while I was in grad school at Drexel University, and on the weekends I would perform. I started in open mics, and then eventually, you know, worked weekends at different clubs, and it was a great way to blow off steam. I became the psychologist in the green room.
Oh, that's great.
For the other
that's
comics,
great.
so that was
Yes.
sort of fascinating in and of itself. But now I get to integrate both of them into the work that I do with students.
Yes, and you know, so your mission with students is to teach them basically to get the message across that there's a natural way to get high, feel happy, and you're not like on a mission, don't do drugs, but kind of educate them, open their minds to other possibilities. And, you know, because currently, I know when people say I'm in my first year in college, it's almost synonymous with drinking and partying.
Right.
So it's almost not even a choice. It's almost not even on their consciousness that there are other possibilities.
Well, it appears that way. The problem really is our culture. I mean, if you look, let's take Italy. I'm Italian, so I talk a lot about Italy. I have cousins who live in Sicily. I asked them years ago, like, why don't you guys no one appears to be drunk on a Saturday night, midnight? You know, there are young and old walking around the streets, and nobody seems to be out of control. And she responded, well, it's uncool to be drunk. We don't behave like that here. And so they may even drink the same amount of alcohol, for all I know, as people in the United States, but they don't behave in a drunk fashion because it's uncool. And so in our culture, as you mentioned, I mean, going to college, it is sort of assumed that the cool thing to do is to go out, drink heavily, behave in a way that's out of control, that's what you're supposed to do, because they're told that in movies and music and the images that are put forth to them.
And it's put forth in a very charming way, like it makes it look attractive.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to, whoa, wait a minute, there could be something else and there could be something damaging about that.
Right, you'll never see a Seth Rogen movie that ends with, you know, him having memory problems and no job, right? It's always funny and has a light ending, and there's so many movies and so much, you know, so many musicians' songs that are about the party that don't really discuss the consequences.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about the consequences.
Sure.
So one of the things that I read in your book is that up until the age of 25, your brain isn't fully formed. Yes?
Correct. Yeah, particularly the insulation of the brain, the white matter. And white matter helps insulate neurons so it can transmit messages from one part of the brain to the other. The brain develops from the back to the front, so that's why the frontal lobe is the last thing to mature, and the frontal lobe is sort of the seat of reasoning and decision making, and that's why we see so many problems with teenagers making decisions.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you can hear things on the news and you think, what was he thinking? You know?
He probably wasn't. It's interesting because if you actually interview teens who make some of these poor choices and you try to figure out, well, what were you thinking? They're not even really that insightful as to why they chose to do something that was so harmful. Many times it's peer influence. When they get around their peers, they take chances they wouldn't normally take. There was a great study out of Temple University. Lawrence Steinberg, who wrote a book recently on adolescent brain development, did a simulated driving test. And he had teens in this test car, and he told them, look, your friends can see you through the window over there. So the teens driving, believing their peers could see them, took more risks during the game than a teen that didn't have any peers watching them. So it says a lot about the influence or perceived, you know, the influence of perceived peers.
So, you know, your job you know, you're kind of the one you've created for yourself, is to educate young adults, teens and young adults, on the dangers. Like, it costs them something. It costs them brain cells, it costs them memory, it costs them in their decision making, and then the consequences of poor decision making. But for most of us, you know, don't smoke, you'll get cancer. It's kind of, yeah, right, you know, maybe next year, kind of thing. So we hear the information, and I don't mean to make light of it, but it doesn't fully register.
Right.
Like, I'm the one at risk. So how do you kind of get access to the kids to have them actually pay attention?
It's a great question, and the answer is comedy. At the end of the day, you know, teens want to relate to the person who's presenting to them. And so I use comedy about my family, about my life, sort of attachment issues that I have been dealing with, but they relate to that because they're dealing with some of those same attachment issues. So if you can come in and get people laughing, suddenly they're listening. You're absolutely right that, you know, to tell a teenager, look, if you get involved with alcohol and drugs, you could lose 10 years off your life. What do they care? Dying at 70 versus 60, you know, it doesn't matter when you're 16. You're not thinking about dying. What I try to do is to connect with them and then ultimately say, look, scaring you isn't going to work. If it did, I'd be scaring you the whole program. I would come out and yell and scream and say you're going to die. If it worked, I would do that, but it just doesn't. So ultimately, you know, what does work? Well, teaching them techniques for helping them have better self-control, for helping them deal with stress. And even though we may not look at a teenager's life as stressful as an adult,
I think it's very stressful.
It's very stressful these days, especially if they're in a high-achieving community like Princeton or many towns that I'm in. So I try to spend most of the time talking about natural highs like exercise and laughter and eating well and helping other people. Meditation, that's another big one. I'm into transcendental meditation myself, and so I try to impress upon them the sort of benefits of just disconnecting from everything for a few minutes every day and trying to settle your mind. And that sort of forced rest can be so helpful when they're dealing with stress later on. So that's how I approach it.
One of the things that you said is that the problem with drugs and alcohol is it doesn't kill them quick enough. Right. So that, you know, if at every party you knew someone was going to die from drugs and alcohol, people would be paying attention, like whose turn is it tonight, you know? But it doesn't. So how do you create that sense of urgency?
You know, I think that it's such a funny idea that if someone dropped dead at every single party, it would actually influence behavior, because we know that if you punish something or give a consequence right away, it changes behavior. So our society today basically shows that alcohol and drugs not only doesn't have a consequence, but it gets rewarded.
Yes.
So they get rewarded for this behavior. So, you know, what can I do to, you know, sort of give them a sense of urgency? Well, I try to talk about things that are important to the students today. So their performance athletically or academically, or you know, whether it's on stage or their leadership activities, their performance can be affected by certain drugs. In particular, their memory performance can be affected, their athletic performance. And there are studies that show, you know, how you can get drunk or high on a weekend, and by Wednesday or Thursday still have some of the effects of that activity on your performance, on your reaction time, on your endurance, and so forth. And so that tends to resonate more with them. And I'm not using it as a scare tactic. It's ultimately saying, look,
here are the facts.
Here's what happens to you. I could tell you that a percentage of you are probably going to die because of drugs and alcohol. That is true, by the way. And we're going to feel terrible for whoever that is, right? But that's a small percentage. Yeah. And another small percentage will be those who will be addicted to substances. Very small percentage of an audience. However, we do know that if all of you start using marijuana, let's say, there's going to be a large percentage of you who are going to have memory problems as a result of this if you smoke every single day. That we can reliably say, and you should know this. These are facts. This is not something I'm sort of making up, not my opinion. This is what the research shows us. So just keep that in mind as you look at people promoting this behavior, saying how great it is for you. Know that it will affect the teen brain, especially in comparison to the adult brain. Teenagers' brains are a lot more vulnerable to substances.
Yeah. And you know, there's the whole thing about peer pressure, of course. One of the things you said in your book, which I think is, you know, you talk about getting a natural high from taking a stand for something. To me, that's so powerful, but it's also hard for a teen to take a stand for something. So, you know, your brother, your older brother, was the poster child for what not to do in your mind, and you saw the consequences. Now, another younger brother might have just followed suit, depending on whatever the circumstances were and the family culture was, you know, but you looked at him and said, not me. So you had a built-in motivator. There are kids out there who don't have built-in motivators. So, you know, as a coach, I know motivation is one of the hardest things to sustain. And as you said, you have to want it. So then how do you create the want for it?
That's $1 million question right there. How do you create the want? You know, I think that ultimately it's the environment that can create the want for you. If there are supportive elements to your environment that are encouraging you to pursue positive things, rewarding things, you know, that's why I talk so much about natural highs. I see them as positives. There's something to reach for, to strive for. You know, if I look at my own life, seeing my brother, you know, dealing for 15 or 20 years, you know, with the party scene and substance abuse, you know, I don't look at that as a scare tactic. For me, it shaped my behavior. I mean, I watched what he was doing, and I decided to go in a different direction. And honestly, I did it back then. I'd lost a grandfather who was the mayor of Point Pleasant Beach and beloved in my family and just a wonderful human being. And he died right around that time. I was in middle school. My brother's in high school having a lot of his problems. And I could remember the clear thought of, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pursue sports at the time, which is probably hard for you to believe that I was into football because I'm built more like a reader than a football player. But the truth is that I saw sports as a way to make my grandfather proud of me. And that pushed me in the direction of being a leader, because once you start playing on team sports and you know you want to win games, you want to lead the team, and I discovered some leadership qualities in myself, and that's what drove me to the next sort of step when I got to high school and then in college and I became an activist. So if it wasn't for the supportive environment I had in athletics, in my family, you know, in the community, pushing me, once I got a taste of, you know, more positive things, I don't know that I would have gone in that direction. A big motivator too was going to a leadership conference in high school where I met like-minded students who didn't party, didn't drink, do drugs. They were more focused on other things. That was also a great supporter.
Yeah, you know, and sometimes it's the luck of the draw. And so one of the things that you talk about is this kind of, it's not so much the activity as the camaraderie. And I watched my sons as they were growing into young men and with their friends. I mean, they had such a blast. And, you know, they're just rolling on the floor laughing and kind of the way they tease each other and make fun of each other, but in a kind of, you know, connected way. And that's the high, I think, that you're talking about. And then we somehow assume that we have to add the alcohol because it just is kind of in our culture. But one of the natural highs is just hanging out with people you like and having a good time. Agreed,
and it crushes me when I see alcohol companies or any kind of promotion around something that's so positive and natural, like a sporting event, paired with a substance. Because it's really overconsumption. I mean, if you look at it, and in some ways I relate to the whole Occupy movement when it was going on, when they really were tapping into overconsumption in our country, because I'm thinking, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Why is it that we can't just enjoy a great meal, or a great game, or hanging out with friends? Why do we have to push it to then abusing a substance on top of it?
Yes. Well, it's like taking a piece of chocolate, and then, oh, this is wonderful. Well, let me put a little peanut butter on it, you know. And oh, let me put a little syrup on it, you know. And again, it's not a bad thing, but we haven't been taught to stop or to actually, I think, you know, in mindfulness meditation, like to fully experience the moment, moment by moment. One of my spiritual teachers was Ram Dass, and I remember him talking about, you know, so there I am sitting in the hot tub, you know, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is so good. Oh, but it would be better if I had a glass of wine. And then you get the glass of wine. Oh my God, this is so good. But, oh, maybe I need some company, or maybe I need to smoke up, or whatever it is. So it's, you know, I do this in my classes where I have them do an exercise of eating their food and like watching yourself reaching for it, bringing it to your mouth, feeling the texture, chewing it 30 times, you know, and then I ask them what they observe. And this one guy made a brilliant statement. He said, I noticed that as soon as the food was in my mouth, my mind was not on the food, but on the next reach. And I think that's kind of what happens, is we're so not present to the experience that we're already reaching for the next.
It's a hedonic treadmill, right? You're
yes.
just constantly taking the next step. And why can't we just enjoy and appreciate that moment for what it is?
I think that's a teachable skill. And I think you talk about meditation, you know. Meditation is one of the things. And, you know, I know even my adult clients, when I say to them meditation, it's like, and I say, you know, go on YouTube, a guided meditation, 8 million of them, you know, pick one. You don't like it, there's another one, but try it, you know?
I think I try to bring it to the everyday level and the benefits. Jerry Seinfeld said once, it's kind of like a cell phone charger for your phone. You know, that's what meditation is. It recharges your brain. I noticed the effects a few weeks in. I went out to this great pizza place in Hopewell, Nomad. I don't know if you've been there, but I was out with my 1-year-old daughter, my wife, and my daughter pooped up her diaper so bad that my wife, she goes, this one's yours. I'm not changing this. And so I picked her up and I brought her outside. And this is something that would normally get me stressed out. Yeah, I'm holding her out like this, and I go outside of the car, and I just know that this is going to be a massive situation. But because I've been doing the meditation, I noticed that the stress that I should have been feeling was sort of, it was there, you know, I could see it almost, but I wasn't feeling it.
Yes.
So I cleaned up the diaper, threw it out, and took off the outfit, burned it, right? Put on a new diaper, and then it hit me, oh no, I don't have another outfit. I have to walk back into this restaurant with a half-naked daughter, and I get to the table, my wife is tense, and she goes, do we have to leave? She sees my daughter in a diaper, and we have to go. No, we're fine, keep eating. And we eat, and she goes, what happened to you? You're so calm. I mean, because normally I wouldn't be so calm. Even though I'm a psychologist, I'm also Italian.
Right.
And sometimes the Italian just breaks free, like Tony Soprano. Oh, what is this? Look at this poop. You gotta be kidding me. You know, just lose it. But I didn't. In this moment, I said, no, we're fine. And she goes, what's going on? I told her the meditation makes it feel as though I can still be here. I don't have to get lost in anger or stress or
resist the situation, because that's what happens, is we resist the situation, and this shouldn't be, and oh my God, and, you know, as opposed to just being in the moment.
And then spend the rest of the night upset that the evening was ruined. Why does the evening have to be ruined? It wasn't ruined. We were fine.
But we tend to do that. We tend to blanket the entire experience with the one thing that seemed to intrude. I want to get back to the teen thing, because when you went to college, you started a program that getting people enrolled in the idea of not drinking and drugging, but having a lot of fun. And I think your roommate was the one who said to you, that's social suicide.
Yeah.
And you said to him,
I said, I'm not listening to you, Jason. You haven't washed your sheets in a year.
Yes, exactly.
Why am I taking advice from you?
Yes, so tell us about that program.
So I went to Bucknell University in Pennsylvania, and Bucknell, like many colleges, small liberal arts colleges, big party school. I went there not really knowing what that meant. You know, you're sort of living in an alcoholic family your freshman year when you're on a dorm.
Yes.
People are coming back drunk at 3 in the morning, you know, throwing up in the bathroom, breaking windows. And the school, they clean it up quickly because they're bringing in a tour the next day, you know, and they want the windows repaired. They want the vomit cleaned up. But you're living there in that situation. And here I was growing up in my family with seeing my brother choosing a different path, but now I'm living in a college where I'm seeing this play out. So I decided either I'm transferring and leaving the school or I'm going to do something. And so I took the stand, and that's where I say it was a natural high for me, because all of a sudden, once I stood up and sort of declared, like, look, I think this group would be a great thing for the school, I watched sort of two groups form. You know, there was one group that said, like my roommate, it's social suicide, you're crazy, you're out of your mind. And then the other group of people, some of which were partiers, would say, this is great, you need to keep going, this is so interesting. Professors would write me notes.
So what would you do?
So I listened to the more positive group.
But what kinds of things did you do?
And the group, once we formed, they really wanted late night events. You know, they wanted things to do on the weekend. They didn't have the pressures of going to a party. Right. So they wanted bowling and ice skating, bring comedians to campus. You know, road trips, very simple things. But for college students, it's kind of retro to go bowling. Like suddenly it's cool again, you know. And the group is now 21 years old. Wow. So it stood the test of time. thanks to the people who've led it. I mean, I graduated in '96 and then in '98 with my master's, so that's when I left. But over the years, we've lived in several homes. The university gave us a house in 1995. They approved $250,000 to fix up a fraternity house to move my group in, which is sort of the big news. That's what got us, in magazines and newspapers, and it was so exciting back then. And that's what the empowerment piece was just seeing the excitement and seeing people talk about it, seeing the university put the name of our group, which was Calvin and Hobbes after the comic strip, into brochures for the university, and talk about how it made the university unique. Calvin and Hobbes, I love the cartoon because it's two characters just having playful, good times, making their own rules, and that's really what we did. And I think that's why the group has survived, because they've always made their own sort of way,
Has it translated onto other campuses, colleges?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been speaking for 20 years, so I promote the idea to high schools, to colleges, and there's about 100 groups at colleges across the country right now that do similar things to Calvin and Hobbes, many of which I helped to sort of promote and get on the map. But what's neat is to see how those schools or those communities take it and run with it. So last year I was in Sault Ste. Marie in Ontario. I know you're Canadian, and they'd never done any sort of alcohol or drug awareness week in the schools. And I was in a school district called Algoma, which is the size of France. It's just, in terms of landmass, it's huge, but not a lot of schools there. I did a presentation for all the vice principals and some of the student leaders, and they loved the concept of natural highs so much that they went back and they created a week in February where they were every school was going to be responsible for a natural high week. And the students would have to, do something fun during that time, and they videotaped it. And I got to see the results just last week, and it just blew my mind to see them playing like snow soccer, and they had like the snow Olympics, and they were doing all these neat things that I would have never dreamed up. But they saw them as fun ways to get outside in the dead of winter and just change your brain chemistry. At the end of the day, that's all it is about: being active, being together, having some laughs, and appreciating those laughs. Enjoying the camaraderie and not saying, well, now we have to get wasted too.
Yes.
Just enjoy that for what it is. It's a great thing.
Yeah. I think it takes, I'm so happy to hear about it, Again, it really takes a kind of an intention to be aware of it, because the culture promotes what you just talked about. Let's go out and play, snow soccer, and then let's go drink. And so it takes some kind of awareness and intention to say, like even creating a week, the experience can then have them carry it on. That may be part of the why do it or want it, because it is in and of itself fun, wonderful. But then again, we're taught to add another layer and another layer and another layer. And one of the things you said in your book that I really enjoyed is you don't have a hangover from laughing too much, but you do have a hangover from drinking or drugging. Yeah,
and there's a really neuroscience sort of basis for this. So, you go out partying, drinking, drugging, and you're forcing your brain chemicals into a state. You're going to feel good for a period of time, and then you're going to overdo it and feel terrible afterwards. So it's almost like you release the neurochemicals, the dopamine, the serotonin, to a really high level, and then they've got to come back to normal, and they do so by going below normal and then eventually coming back. If you go out and see a funny movie or go to a comedy show, or you're hanging out with friends having belly laughs at 3 in the morning, you don't wake up feeling horrible, because your brain never allows itself to go to a sort of neurotoxic state where those neurochemicals are damaging your brain tissue. There are very few natural experiences that will damage your brain tissue. Post-traumatic stress disorder, it comes from that. You see trauma, and it actually can subtly damage your brain by just seeing something traumatic.
Right.
But the natural highs I talk about in my book, they don't do that. You ultimately wake up feeling great. So, for example, the night after I did my first stand-up comedy show, Saturday night, packed house, it went well. I woke up the next morning and I just had so much energy. I was so excited to keep producing more comedy, to do it again. And it was like, wow, this is just amazing. It is a natural high, and it's still going on hours later, and I can drive a car. You know what I mean? Yes. I'm not a danger to anybody.
Yes.
That's the key.
Yeah, and I think for me, the significant thing that I would want young people to get is, I'm not related. I don't relate to I'm going to live 10 years less, But the idea is that it costs me something right now in terms of my energy, in terms of my brain functions, in terms of my results in school and the people around me, and that there are other possibilities. And, you know, even something that sounds as like boring, although I know that at Harvard Business School they now teach meditation, the idea of meditating, brief periods of time, you know, and having fun, natural laughter. You know, one of the things, I had seen this movie, documentary on the water evacuation of people the day of 9/11. I mean, they evacuated more people than ever in one episode, and they just called in every boat from everywhere and small tugboats, everything, and evacuated, you know, millions of people as far as I remember. But they interviewed this one guy, and he said it was the most, he was a boat guy, and he said it was the most meaningful day of his life. And because he had made a difference. And again, you know, you can make it sound like goody two-shoes, but you can also say, you know, go out and, like you said, you know, you had this exercise where you overtipped the waiter or overtipped the waitress. Like, how fun is that? And then that's a lasting high. So there is access to all of that. No question.
You know, for my book, I interviewed drug addicts who'd been using for decades, and I asked them a simple question: what's the best you've ever felt in your life? Assuming they would say, oh, that first time I shot heroin or whatever. No, the answers that come back are those meaningful life experiences. Yeah. That time I scored the winning goal, the girl I fell in love with, that day where I really helped people. Yeah. The brain knows the difference between the high that you gave it and the high that just happened naturally. Yeah. And so if I can encourage young people early on to pursue those highs, to come up with a whole list of things that they find meaningful and enjoyable, A, they'll build skills, and B, I think, you know, they're going to be healthier people.
And happier.
And happier, yeah.
And on that note, unfortunately, our time is up. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you for doing what you do. And go out and change the world.
Thanks, Natasha.
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.